Alrighty. And we are live. Let me put up the timer just to let guys know that we are now live.
Mhm.
Alrighty. Good evening. Hi, Grace.
Hi, Noeline.
Hi. So we are now live. We'll just jump right into it. I'll introduce myself and then I'll introduce you. So my name is Noeline Mumbi. I am a
Mhm.
supply chain professional and an operational excellence specialist. But this evening I am showing up as a safe space curator. Safe space is a judgment-free learning zone where we get to learn, where we get to have our questions that we do not know where else to have answered. It's a capacity building and capability building platform. And this evening, we are joined by Grace Karaoke, our in-house therapist. Karibu sana, Grace. Thank you so much for accepting the
Thank
invite
you.
once.
Thank you.
How are you? Oh, okay. All
Okay.
right.
Sorry.
Let's just give it a moment. It's okay. It's okay. We give it a moment to
Yeah.
set up. It's okay.
Mm.
As you're doing
Okay.
this, Grace, I want to. Oh, I've put myself into screen. I want to introduce you.
Okay. Mhm.
Hi, Grace. Can you hear me?
Oh, now I can hear you. I
Oh
wondered
my
what
goodness.
happened.
Or okay. So at what point did you lose me?
I don't even know. So it's okay.
Oh,
Let's just continue.
okay, all right. I wanted you to take center stage as I am presenting you on the solo
Okay.
layout. So I'll just reintroduce you again because I was going on and on and on about who you are
Oh.
and your questions. Yeah, so let me just introduce you once again for those of
Mm.
our audience who are joining us for the first time. So, Grace Karaoke is a seasoned marriage and family therapist whose passion is to empower individuals, families, organizations, and in turn, the society to live authentically and be able to effectively and successfully navigate through life transitions. She has been able to live out her passion both in the USA and in Kenya. Her overseas experience has given her a unique edge to relate to and effectively work with individuals, families, and organizations from diverse identity groups. Grace holds a Bachelor of Arts degree in Christian ministry and a Master of Arts degree in marriage and family therapy. She is a registered member of the National Certified Counselors in the USA, as well as an accredited member of the Kenya Counseling and Psychological Association. While practicing in the USA, she was a duly licensed clinical professional counselor with the states of North Carolina and Maryland. As a professional therapist, she is committed to providing client centered support to inspire, empower, and enable her clients to reach their goals. She facilitates personalized therapy sessions for individuals, couples, families, and organizations. She is a consultant with Anchor Relationship Network and offers substance abuse assessments, treatment, and training. She provides counseling, and she has also been contracted to provide employee assistance program services to corporate employees and has had an above average review. So if you go on her website, you'll be able to see the reviews that she has received. Grace's main passion is empowering marriages and families. She does this through group sessions, family sessions, couple sessions, and individual sessions. She has facilitated groups such as bridal showers, corporate sessions on marriage and parenting. Youth sessions are also family sessions on areas of growth, crisis intervention, grief, and other family transitions. Karibu sana, Grace. Thank you so much for agreeing to join us this evening.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Noeline, for such a great introduction. And I'm glad to be here today. Looking forward to this next minutes as we talk about the topic of the day. So
Oh.
I'm very happy to be here.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Grace. As you're just mentioning it, today's topic is imposter syndrome. And it was
Mm,
upon request from one of the Safe Space community members. So, this is part of
mm,
what Safe Space does. When a community member raises a concern or a question or an area of growth development that they would like addressed, you let me know and I get the subject matter expert to come and speak to us about it. And enough of that, Grace, over to you.
mhm.
I am going to add the presentation on the stage and mute myself and hand it over to you.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, so we're going to speak about healing the imposter syndrome, and I usually do this under the the big name of healing shame. Now, when we think about imposter syndrome, and I'm gonna go to the definitions, it's good to understand that imposter syndrome is actually something that has to do with our mindset. It's a narrative that we run in our brain that is not necessarily rooted in truth. So it's a behavioral health phenomena describes us that is described as self-doubt, and we are self-doubting about our intellect, our skill set, and our accomplishments. And especially this happens a lot to people who have very high achievements and they are driven. So those people who know their temperament, if you are choleric, melancholic, this will be a big issue for you, because especially if you have what now we call the underlying issues of shame, which can come from your childhood experiences and other experiences in your life that were fertile ground for this kind of personal narrative to grow. So it is characterized by inability to internalize success And so I'm succeeding, but people are giving me all the accolades, but I'm not accepting it. I might make all kinds of excuses why they are saying it. So experiencing pervasive feelings of self-doubt, anxiety, depression, and or apprehension of being exposed as a fraud. This is usually very important because I keep having this narrative in my mind that I'm not as good as people tell me I am, and therefore one of these days they will wake up and find that I'm a fraud. So you are constantly afraid of being exposed, that you are not what they think you are, despite verifiable and objective evidence of their successfulness. So it's important to understand imposter syndrome is a mindset. It's a narrative that is in our mind, and therefore we can change it. So imposter syndrome is a psychological pattern in which an individual doubts their accomplishments and has a persistent internal fear of being exposed as a fraud. There are intrusive thoughts questioning their competence and abilities, feelings of resistance to compliments and celebration of self, fear that people are just being nice. I remember myself, I used this year resistance to compliments until I had a friend who just told me, Grace, when I tell you you are looking nice, just tell me thank you. That's enough. You don't have to explain why I am not sioni vizuri. I can't see very well. That's why you are trying to tell me what I'm telling you is not correct. So I started that journey of being able to honor and respect when somebody tells me you did a good job, or you are looking good, or I like your dress. I don't start saying, oh, this one I just bought, it's a mutumba. We don't do that. So that is that the celebration of self, the acknowledgement that other people are celebrating you. Now, there were these two ladies are the ones who coined the imposter syndrome. They developed this phenomenon based on their observations while working with highly successful women. So women are the ones who really struggle with imposter syndrome, and it will show up in many spaces. They are mothering, if they are partners in a romantic relationship, their relationship with their parents, their relationships at work. So they noticed that despite having outstanding academic and professional accomplishments, these women often attributed their success to external factors like luck or timing rather than their own ability and competence. You see, it's very, again, I am going to say now, I'm going to be able to say, oh, it's by the grace of God. Yes, it's by the grace of God, but I also need to be able, and I shouldn't say but, I should say it's by the grace of God and my effort that I put a lot of time into this. I went to school, I paid a lot of money to be the kind of person I am right now, that I have owned my success. And then they initially termed this phenomena the imposter phenomenon. Through their research, they provided a framework to understand why certain individuals, despite the evident success, felt like frauds and were unable to internalize their commitment. So they are constantly looking for the next thing, and it's almost like you cannot fill their cup because it's almost like it has a hole in the bottom. The more you put in, the more they feel unworthy and unfulfilled. So what causes imposter syndrome? Family dynamics and upbringing. Early family environments that place a strong emphasis on achievement can sometimes set unrealistic high standards. Children who are celebrated not because of who they are, but because of how they perform, they are candidates for imposter syndrome. So that now at work, it's almost like, it's very interesting how you are working, you desire you desire to be esteemed and to be validated, and yet when you get it, you refuse it. So it's an interesting dissonance in the brain. If children are primarily praised for their successes and criticized for their failures, they might grow up with a skewed sense of their own abilities and have a deep fear of failure. And then, so even when they succeed, they are afraid to celebrate or to rest or to enjoy the success because they are constantly afraid something is going to go wrong. So I have to stay on my toes in order for me to stay successful. And so, but at the same time, I don't believe I'm successful. So you can see the dissonance right there. Highly competitive work environments can exacerbate those feelings of being an imposter. When everyone seems exceptionally competent, it can intensify one's doubts about their own abilities and achievements. And this is what I normally talk about about the self comparison, where I'm comparing myself with other people. Sometimes when I have a client, and they will be talking about how they are not successful or they haven't done what they expected to do, and I will ask a question which is almost like a rhetorical question. I will say, compared to who? So you are feeling that you haven't reached where you are supposed to be, compared to who? And then we get now into the conversation about where or the causes of those feelings. So stereotypes and discrimination, we know in Kenya, we know this very well. Members of minority groups or those who face stereotypes related to their competence, e.g., based on gender, race, or ethnicity, might be more susceptible to imposter syndrome. If they are underrepresented in their field or at their level of achievement, they may feel added pressure to prove their worth or fear being viewed as token representatives. Now, in the US, they have what they call affirmative action. Here in Kenya, we know about the 2/3 gender thing. So sometimes individuals can struggle with that, because was I appointed to this position because of my gender or because of my competence? So sometimes that can cause a little. I remember, I will not lie to you, discrimination, social stereotypes. One time, I don't know how many of you remember the long Kenya bus, the red one that used to be there. I think these days it's called Kenya Mpya, that group. But in our day, it used to be called Kenya Bus Service, KBS. And it used to be that long bus. Then one day, I saw a woman driver. And it kind of shook me, because, and I actually didn't enter that bus because of the stereotype that women, big buses and big lorries and big trucks, they are supposed to be driven by men. Then I went to live in the US, to study and live in the US, and most of the school buses, which are the long yellow bus, are driven by women. And now my stereotype started to be shaken. Now, here in Kenya with boda, same thing. You see, if you see a woman who is a boda transporter, sometimes we can have that stereotype that women are not able to do certain things. So, and then academic and professional settings, transitioning to new and challenging roles, such as starting a university or a new job, especially in prestigious or high stakes environments, can trigger imposter syndrome. The lack of familiarity and the steep learning curve can make individuals doubt their abilities and achievements. So whenever you feel and you can see that you are getting into that imposter syndrome space, please ask yourself where it's coming from. Take time to understand where it's coming from. And then psychological factors such as low self-esteem and a tendency to attribute success to external factors, not believing in your ability and thinking that it's luck, or it's because it's my uncle or whoever alinitetea. So you want to check and see, where does mine come from, and begin to correct that. Now, I'm not going to go into types of imposter syndrome. I would like to shift gears and go into how to manage it because we don't have much time. So I don't leave you guys with, so I know I have imposter syndrome. How do I begin? And so what I'm going to do, I'm going to change, if you will give me a minute, and I don't know whether individuals
Yes.
would like to, huh?
Sorry for the interruption. May I please request that we quickly go through the different types, just briefly, summarily, so that as individuals we can be able to self-assess and tell this is where I am before we go into how do I manage it.
Okay, no problem. That's all right. I was just wondering about leaving people without, because I can see how our time has gone. That's okay. So the perfectionist is that person who believes that they have to do everything perfect, and therefore anything that is lower than perfect, hakuna haja. It's like if it is not perfect, then I'm not going to do it. And so you want to ask yourself whether you struggle with that. Then we have the expert, feels like an imposter because they don't know everything. They have to know everything. So about a subject or a topic, or they haven't mastered every step in a process. And because of there is more there is more for them to learn, they don't feel as if they are experts. They kind of think and again, it's a form of perfectionism. And then the natural genius, in this imposter type, you may feel like a fraud simply because you don't believe you are naturally intelligent or competent. If you don't get something right the first time around, or it takes you longer to master a skill, you feel like an imposter. And there are so many things that we don't naturally know. We learn, we train ourselves. Like now, cooking chapatis. Who was born with the ability to cook chapatis? It's a skill. Cooking. How many of you know how to make a samosa, a perfect samosa? Some of us don't. Myself, I have tried. They always come off when I put them in the whatever. So so there are some things that we need to understand. It's a skill that you need to work on. And if you perfect it, it doesn't mean you are an imposter. It means actually you are an expert in it because you put effort and you did. The soloist is it's also possible to feel like an imposter if you had to ask for help to reach a certain level or status. Since you couldn't get there on your own, you question your competence or abilities. Again, it's a perfectionistic thing. And then the super person is the type of imposter syndrome involving believing that you must be the hardest worker or reach the highest levels of achievement possible. If you don't, then you are a fraud. So we need to kind of check ourselves. Now, the perfectionistic, this one, am I repeating myself? A common trait among those experiencing imposter syndrome, perfectionism, and individuals with this trait set unrealistic high expectations for themselves. When they inevitably fail to meet those standards, they feel like imposters, they doubt their abilities, and they fear exposure. Now, the interesting thing about the imposter syndrome is that even if you feel it, most of us go ahead and actually do the right thing. But because the mindset is there, I don't even see that. Even though I was feeling like I was feeling the fear of failure, I actually went ahead and did what I needed to do, and I successfully did it, but I'm still thinking I'm an imposter, you see. And then performance anxiety, fear not living up to the expectations of yourself or others, leads to performance anxiety. This anxiety often exacerbates imposter feelings because individuals worry that they cannot perform well enough to maintain their supposed mask of competence. Now, this one is where a person feels anxiety before they perform, and then they go ahead and they perform very well. But because they were feeling anxiety before they performed, they don't believe they are competent. And so what we want to do is to be able to say it is normal for you to feel anxiety before a performance. And you will go there and you will slay. And it's okay. You can celebrate it in spite of the fact that you started with a wobbly start. You still made it, because performance anxiety has nothing to do with competence. It has a lot to do with just the way you are made up, and there may be many reasons why we may feel that it's almost like exam when we have exam anxiety. It's the same thing. It's not because I don't know my stuff. It's maybe I just feel very anxious when I have to be tested, when I have to be put on the spot. And we need to understand, why do I feel the way I feel? So that self-exploration is very important. Now, procrastination, I'm a recovering procrastinator myself. And due to the fear of being exposed as a fraud, people with imposter syndrome might procrastinate. So where you are constantly waiting and waiting until last minute because of all this fear of, why did they choose me? I can't do this. They know that I have a lot of fear, whatever it is that we tell ourselves, and it's going to cause us not to do things in a timely way, which might end up creating the very fear we have. Because if I wait until last minute, I don't prepare myself as well as I should be. So this deep-seated fear that their work will not meet the high standards they believe are expected of them. So when we procrastinate, we actually make that fear real. And so learning how to develop what we call procrastination resilience. Resilience means I feel something, it takes me down, I bounce back quickly, and I continue the journey. So if it is today, I'm realizing, gosh, I have a paper to do on Friday, but then I feel this procrastination coming in because of fear and whatever, I need to bounce back and get down and put a plan in place and start working on it, because today is Wednesday. So I have 2 days to be able to do it. And that is the way you overcome and you develop what we call resilience in these things that we struggle with. Paralysis, this is in line with procrastination. It can occur when the fear of failure becomes overwhelming. This can lead to inaction, particularly in situations where the individual feels the risk of exposure or as an imposter is very high. So you get paralyzed. You can't do anything. You just sit there on TikTok and you go like this, and before you know it, it's 2 hours and you haven't done anything. So it's important to recognize it and then be quick to turn it around. Now, sometimes individuals with imposter syndrome struggle to take pride in their accomplishments. They attribute successes, again, like we said, to the outside, and then professional stagnation due to their fears and insecurities. Individuals might avoid seeking new opportunities or challenges. They fear that taking on new responsibility might expose their supposed inadequacies, leading to professional stagnation. I know this very well, and I will tell you where mine comes from. My professional stagnation, or the thought of it, is because of the class system of Kenya. Who is your father? Where did you go to school? Now, if I tell you the school I went to in high school, you have never heard of it. So now, if I'm in the space where I'm working with professionally with people who went to Alliance, they went to Kenya High, or these other big schools, they went to international schools. So you can see how I can be in their midst, even though we are on the same level. We both have master's degrees. We have a lot of experience. We are expert in what we do. That in itself, the fact that I have this problem with where I came from and how I got here, can cause us to really internalize that feeling of the imposter syndrome. So this is a small questionnaire. Do you agonize over even the smallest mistakes or flaws in your work? Do you attribute your success to luck or outside factors? And those of us who are religious, it's by the grace of God. If it was not for God, let's celebrate that and celebrate that He gave us the ability to do it. So we actually put effort and time and money and everything with the grace of God. Let's not just say it was just. So let's celebrate what God is doing through us, not for us only, but for and through. Are you sensitive to even constructive criticism? Hello, yes. And I am a recovering one. I have come a long way. So I look at now constructive criticism to me is feedback. When I call it feedback, I am able to understand it and to receive it better. So will I still feel that thing you feel like a pain when somebody says something that criticizes you? Well, yes, I do, but I quickly bounce back because my brain has been trained to see it as feedback. Do you feel like you will inevitably be found out as a phony? You need to kind of also identify that. Do you downplay your expertise even in areas where you are genuinely more skilled than others? Yes, I have been there myself, and I thank God because I have been able to work through that. Because remember, again, my friends, it's a mindset. It's a narrative in your brain that is rooted in either those things that we said in the beginning, but mostly if you have ever been what we call humiliated because you are performing something and you are humiliated, you will struggle a lot with the imposter syndrome. So the first steps to managing imposter syndrome is question your thoughts. And like I said, check and see what is the thought that is going on in your brain. As you start to assess your abilities, take baby steps, question whether your thoughts are rational or irrational. Does it make sense to believe that you are a fraud given everything that you know? And Noelina will tell you, a tool I use for my people who are doing personal development with me, and it's called Who Am I? The first question is, what were and are your achievements beginning with your childhood? And a lot of people will stop and say, I couldn't think of any. And then I say, okay, so let's look. And we go through it, and they are able to say, oh my goodness, you made me remember. I actually got an award for the best handwriting in class 2. And I said, that's an accomplishment, So we do need to actually look and see what are the things that I have done well in my life that I have, said, that's not. In fact, I remember one person told me, they said, you mean that is an accomplishment? And I said, yes, you are exceptional in what you did. Were you a prefect in high school? Yes, I was. What were the things that you used to do when you were in primary school? And those are things that you need to bring to your mind and see how you have built your competence over time, regardless of how it happened. And then pay attention to your bodily sensations. Whenever you have the imposter syndrome, what do you feel and how does it manifest in your body? So you might feel a tightness of your chest. You might feel a headache coming on. You might feel hot in your face. You might feel sweaty in your hands. You might feel your stomach turning or your back tightens or your shoulders, they tighten. Pay attention to how your body receives that message that I'm an imposter. And now with the bodily sensation, you want to do a lot of relaxation, like deep breathing. You need to go for a walk. You need to get up out of your seat, go stretch, go wash your face, and then do something that we call self-talk. Now, one of the things that I tell people about managing your feelings, don't fight them. Don't fight the feelings of not belonging. Instead, lean into them. How do you lean into them? Is that you pay attention, like I'm saying. Who triggered what? Why did they trigger that? Why is this so important to me that is causing me to have such sensations and such a change of mood? I want to understand and accept them and sit with them kidogo, as I, not for self-pity, but allow myself to explore why. And it's only when you acknowledge your feelings that you can start to unravel the core beliefs that are holding you back. and try to find out. And some people have really gotten to the place where they tell me, I know where this comes from. And they will say something like, this was a message I used to get from such and such. And when they start to do that, you will find that individuals will start to change the way that they are seeing themselves. So I want to share the tips. While I do that, Noeline, I can take a breather. Maybe you can say something, or if there is a question while I share the other slide.
That's a lot. That's quite a bit. And thank you for unpacking it and identifying the different imposter types. It's actually generated a bit of a conversation in the Safe Space WhatsApp group. I'll just read. And the same question has actually also been asked on LinkedIn by one of the viewers, where she's asking, can someone have two types of imposter syndrome? And in on the chat, the same question in a different format, it's being asked, is it possible to fall in more than one imposter syndrome category? And they're saying you're calling them out, you're calling us out in capital letters. So over to you. Is it possible to fall in more than one group of imposter syndrome?
Oh yes, you can even fall on all of them. They tend to kind of thread into each other, and you can fall in all of them. What I want people to do: don't focus too much on what kind of imposter syndrome you are, because the issue is the same. Okay, so identify it, and now let's focus more on where to go with it. So it is possible to fall on all of, like for me, I will tell you, I think I fall in 5 of them, and it depends also on who is triggering and where the triggers are coming from. So one of the things that Noeline, that we do with healing is to be able to identify your triggers, who the person is. And so we, in 3 categories: places, people, and things. Places, people, and things are our triggers. Whenever your mood changes, whether it is in that imposter syndrome space or not, always ask yourself who, where, and what. Because people, places, and things, because that is what is going to cause you to begin to understand where you are coming from, so that you can create a plan of recovery and recovering from whatever the syndrome is. So I hope it answers the questions.
Yes, Grace, it does.
Okay, so I can go on.
Yes, please.
Okay, so let's talk about, this one is what I had just shared there. So let's talk about how to begin the journey. So healing imposter syndrome through cognitive restructuring involves a thoughtful process of identifying, challenging, and altering irrational or maladaptive thoughts surrounding one's achievements and abilities. So start by doing a research on yourself. This is what we call self-awareness. So identify, challenge, and altering. And then imposter syndrome is characterized by feelings of inadequacy, self-doubt, persistent fear of being exposed as a fraud, despite your, so knowing that, you do need to now begin to ask yourself, where do I feel inadequate? Where, what, and who triggers my sense of self-doubt? Then cognitive restructuring is a core aspect of cognitive behavioral therapy. It is one of the models of therapy that I use. I'm so sold out to this, because I believe if you can change the way you think, you can shift the way you feel. And if your feelings are shifted, then your behaviors are going to be shifted. Now, so Noeline, we have talked before, if because you are a follower of many of my classes, and we talk about repeating cycles. You see, people repeat cycles all the time, and they keep asking, why do I keep doing the same thing with different people? And I have heard people who say, I must be the problem. And I usually say, nobody is a problem. We have a problem. Separate yourself from the problem so that you can fix the problem. If you see yourself as a problem, you are dwelling in the space of shame. and you cannot heal unless you address the shame and separate who you are from the behavior. So cognitive behavioral therapy and cognitive restructuring is a core aspect of that. Means that if I can be able to identify how I think and identify how I feel because of those thoughts, then I can identify how I behave, and I can begin to do real behavior change by changing the way I think about myself, about others, and about the world. Now, here I found this and I thought it was good. It is an example of emotional reasoning. Emotional reasoning is where we say, if I feel it, it must be true. And I'm here to tell you, if you feel it, the feeling is true, but it is not a fact. The feeling is telling you, pay attention, something has just shifted. So the feeling alerts you. It's like an alarm. When you hear the alarm go, you don't just sit there and say, oh, the alarm has gone. Mumesikia, the alarm has gone on. The alarm has gone on. No, we don't do that. We wake up and we go check, because the alarm is telling us something is amiss, go and fix it. So feelings are an alarm system within your system that tells you, let's pay attention to something. So if I feel it, if I feel incompetent, therefore I must not have what it takes. It's a feeling, it's not a truth, it's not a fact. I need to question the validity of that. I feel guilty, so this means I must have done something bad. Now, some of us feel guilty because you said no to somebody who wanted to take advantage of you, or you just said no because it doesn't serve where you are and what you want to do at this point. And then you feel guilty. Just because you feel guilty doesn't mean you did something wrong. So that this is emotional reasoning, and it's part of the narrative in our minds that is going to feed the imposter syndrome. So if I'm feeling angry, so this means that I must be wronged. We need to kind of look and say, was I wronged? Was I hurt? Sometimes I tell people, let's separate the anger thing. We start with, I'm upset, I'm frustrated, I am offended, before we say I am angry. And so that we can, or before we say I'm hurt. Because if I feel hurt, that means that I have taken it personally. I need to learn how to separate. And not everything is anger. Sometimes it's disappointment, you see. So that I'm not constantly feeling hurt and offended, and like people are personally, just after me and against me. We need to protect ourselves like that. So that's emotional reasoning. Making a mountain out of a molehill. This is very important because it's where we see something, and before we have sat down to rationally think about it, we react to it and we take it as if it's gospel truth. So if somebody comes and says that my presentation was not up to whatever, and this is a person, I need to first of all ask myself, this feedback that I'm getting from this person, I need to look at the source. So this might be a person who has a personal vendetta against me. So I don't need to have 10 people who tell me, Grace, you did a good job. And then the person who has personal vendetta against me, we look at one thing I did wrong and come and say, that was a useless presentation. And then I forget the 10 and I pick up this one and I go with it and I run with it and I overthink. And I even tell myself I'll never do another presentation again. So how do we do cognitive restructuring? So number one, you want to define what is it, so that if you understand what something is, then you can actually act on the information. And Noeline, I tell people all the time, if you feel, especially there are so many people who struggle with people pleasing, and in terms of guilt, they feel a lot of guilt of when they set boundaries with people. So I usually tell them, go to the dictionary and find the definition of the word guilt, so that you can be able to to see whether what you're concluding is really based on truth. So the cognitive restructuring of identifying negative patterns of thinking that lead to negative belief system that informs how one perceives themselves. So it is good for you to, to recognize that it is a negative pattern of thinking that leads to negative belief system that informs how we see ourselves, how you feel about yourself. So cognitive restructuring, it uses techniques that help to challenge those negative thoughts and replace them with more appropriate thoughts that are rooted in truth and fact. So, step number one, first, I recognize the specific thought that contributes to the feeling of an imposter. Common thoughts might include, I don't really belong here. And then you need to ask yourself, why not? If I don't belong here, who belongs here? Where do I belong then, if not here? I only got lucky. Really, you need to kind of do that questioning of yourself. Is this really true? Sooner or later, they'll find out I'm not as capable as they think. So you are looking at if these are your common thoughts, pay attention. Then number two, examine these thoughts critically and challenge their accuracy. What evidence do I have that this thought is true? What evidence do I have that this thought is not true? Am I basing my thoughts on feelings rather than facts? Are there alternative explanations for why I succeeded? So you do need to kind of allow yourself to challenge those thoughts and then consider the context. Often, imposter feelings are magnified by certain situations, like presenting at a big meeting or receiving an award. Reflect on how the context might be influencing your thoughts and feelings. Like I said, when you went to some school nobody knows, and you are now a professional and expert in what you do, and you are rubbing shoulders with people who went to these big schools, you might begin to feel a sense of not belonging here. And you might start to question your capability, regardless of how you have really worked hard and you have become who you are. Is it possible that the high stakes or visibility are heightening your self-doubt? So again, this is people who are afraid to be in the forefront or to be in the limelight. And usually this is rooted in an humiliation. When you, for instance, you are in primary school, high school, and you are supposed to lead the national anthem, or you are supposed to make an announcement, and then you made a blunder and everybody laughed and you felt so embarrassed. Or even a teacher who embarrassed you in front of everybody, or even being humiliated or judged because of the way you performed something, or even trying out for choir, trying out for football, trying out for a game, and you are not accepted. Those things can impact the imposter feelings. And so it's good for you to kind of know that. Sometimes it can be someone else has challenged the information you have shared, or a request to clarify something. And many times, you again, your imposter syndrome, if you are the expert, your problem is the expert, and then somebody asks you a question and you have no clarity, you don't have an answer, then you might feel as if they are, now everybody is thinking I'm an imposter. Now I learned how to manage that is by one of the things that I do is I will, and I do this a lot, not because I don't have the information, but because I also want people to engage with me. So somebody might ask a question from the audience and I throw it back to the audience and I will say, has anybody ever experienced this? And I can use that also in a space where I'm not ready, I'm not very sure about the answer. And so I give myself a minute or two to be able to regroup myself. But also I do that for the benefit of hearing from others. What are other people thinking about that question? Because I'm also in the learning process. So I'm not thinking that I am all in all. I am the beginning and the end in this subject. No, I am looking at it that there are other people who may also know, and it's okay. So I am not looking at it from a negative place. So number 4, Reframe, where you replace the negative or inaccurate thoughts with more realistic ones, and that lean towards positivity. And they also, and this is not what we call kujichocha. No, they are rooted in truth. So when we say things like that you want to do self affirmations, I usually encourage people, do self affirmations that are rooted in your abilities. Like, for instance, you can say, today I affirm myself because I got to work on time. I affirm myself because today I finished my tasks on time. Those are self affirmations that are rooted in reality. Not I am a really good worker, I know that about myself. No, let me put behavioral aspects to it, real activities, so that it translates into building my belief in myself. And then instead of thinking I must not make any mistakes, you could reframe this to say everyone makes mistakes and I can handle them intelligently when they occur. I remember my son when he was 9, he asked me, Mom, he was very sad that he had made a mistake. And I said, it's all right, it's okay. And this is, but Mom, what if we can't fix it? And I said, well, we will learn from it so that we do not repeat it. Now, by then, I started thinking, oh, I am raising a young man who is going to be a choleric, because now cholerics have little patience for things that they are not things that don't go very well. And then you need to write out a narrative about your professional self that includes your strengths, your achievements, and the realistic challenges you face. So you don't want to kind of just say that I am good, I'm good, I'm good. You are aware that you have some challenges, so that even as you acknowledge your strengths, you are also acknowledging the challenges and you are giving yourself a plan of improvement. Now, the problem is when we are in imposter syndrome, we tend to talk a lot about what we can't do, and we forget, and we talk about it as if we cannot learn, instead of us being able to look at both the strengths and the areas of growth. So it will reflect on your capabilities and your growth areas without judgment. Three things I call them, and I learned this from someone else. So this is not copyright to me. CCJs: comparing, criticizing, and judgment. And you can use the word self in front of each one of them. So self-criticism, self-judgment, and comparing myself to others. Those are killers of personal growth and personal actualizing. So it is important for us to pay attention to that. And then live in the moment, which is what we call mindfulness. Mindfulness can help manage the emotional component of the imposter syndrome by focusing on the present and being more aware of your thoughts without judgment. So learn how to hold space for yourself. You can reduce the power these thoughts have over your emotions by allowing yourself to see them, look at them, write them without judging them. Don't say, this is too bad, I shouldn't be thinking about this. No, accept, this is the way I think, and this is the reason why I'm here. And then come to the present and say, is this rooted in truth or not? Then sometimes we have distorted perceptions of our performance or abilities. Gathering honest feedback from trusted colleagues or mentors can provide a reality check and help reinforce the reframing process. Who are the individuals who give you honest feedback? Do you believe their honest feedback, or does your negative patterns override what they say? You need to kind of identify that. So the 3 C's of cognitive restructuring. Now, this is your take home. Catch it. We have talked about that. So identify and look at what is upsetting you. What is the thought underlying the upsetting feelings? What is the bad prediction I have made? That is fear. What is the bad thing I think I have done? That is your what we are calling your shame and guilt. And then your disappointment is your sadness. And then what is unfair? That is what causes you to be angry. So catch it, be aware, and then check it, evaluate it, evaluate the thoughts, then change it, brainstorm on an action plan. What can I do now instead of why is this happening to me? Go into action. Don't sit in it too long. So that is my presentation for tonight. Unmute yourself.
Sorry, I was speaking on mute. That was very, very detailed, Grace, very impactful. Thank you so much for preparing the deck and for sharing your knowledge and all the information that you have with us. If you'll allow me, I'll just go straight into the questions, and I'll also ask you for a bit of additional time so we can address some of the questions that can be raised. There is one of the questions that has been asked is, how do we bring up kids not to have this imposter syndrome?
Yeah. So, number one, do not celebrate your children too much. Don't tell them you are the best in the world. Don't do that. You are setting them up for failure because there are so many other children who are also the best. So what you want to do, celebrate your children with balance. So tell them what they are doing well, and when you tell them what they are not doing well, do it without too much emotion. Allow them to be able to, and also take them through, learn how to teach your children how to problem solve. I give an example of me being able to tell my son, yes, it's a mistake, it's true, it's a mistake and it's not good, however we can fix it. And then when he asked me what if we can't, I was able to tell him, if we can't, we learn from it. So we begin to train our children to learn that a mistake is not you, it's separate. This is where, Noeline, we need to learn how not to label our children. Don't call your children you are stupid. And what is wrong with your mind? Don't do that. How come you don't understand? But don't do that. Just speak with your child like you would speak to another person with feelings, because our children have feelings. And then there is, I remember with my son, he did class 8 last year, and everyone was telling him, oh, you will get 450. I don't know. And everybody was saying that. But then when he would do the mocks, because they were doing that, a lot, then he would go to 430 and then 380 and all that. And I could see that it was really affecting him. So I sat him down and I said, you know what, son, you have proved that you are capable. You have actually, the concepts, you know them so well. I'm so proud. I listened to you as you explained the concepts and all that, and you have proved that you are competent. The exam is not going to be how you prove that you're good. The exam is just the first exam in your life, and it's not going to define whether you are intelligent or competent or not. And I talked to him during the last month of their exams. I constantly spoke to that boy. By the time KCPE was coming, that boy was relaxed. And every morning we would say, what did we say? You are already great. Go and slay. Go and do it. Not to prove that you are great, because you already are. And I was telling him, and I remember we had that conversation, that it is not great compared to anyone. This is you. This is compared to you. There is no other comparison. And we want to help our children to grow and become who they naturally are. And it is important for you. I have two sons, and one is the first one that I just talked about. He is a sharp kid. His brother is very more of the artistic, and so he takes longer to catch things, to catch concepts. He's not the science kid, He's very artsy. And so we have to be very, very careful that we are not causing them to think that one is better than the other. And so it's very important for us to balance the way that we are talking to our children. But I believe the best way, Noeline, to do this. Remember your childhood. What would you have wanted your parents to do when it comes to competence? Because if if you don't remind yourself, you repeat the same thing to your children.
That is
Yeah.
very true, Grace. Thank you for even sharing from your own personal experience on how we can
Mm.
manage these. The next one, I know you answered this at the very beginning, so I'll just ask for a brief answer as we go through it since it was already answered. How would you define imposter syndrome and what are the common misconceptions about it?
Yeah, imposter syndrome is basically your narrative in your mind that you are not as competent as people think you are. It's about your abilities and your performance and your competence, and you think that people will find out that you are not as good as they think. So the misconception about it, a lot of people think that it is something that is outside of you. No, it's not. Nobody is telling you you are incompetent. It's a mindset, and so it's good to know that. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for summarizing it. Next one, can you explain we covered these different types of imposter syndromes and how they manifest? Let's just list them down since it's already in the recording at the beginning.
Yeah, I may not be able to remember all of them, but let me just
Mm.
summarize it this way. It's perfectionism. And perfectionism is usually rooted in a fear of failure. We talked about the perfectionistic one. I have to do everything perfect. We talked about the soloist, where you have to, if somebody helps you along the line to become competent, then you believe that you are not. Then we talked about the professional perfectionism, where I look at myself and I compare myself with other people. And if I'm not on the same league as them, like I was explaining, you went to a certain school and other people went to a certain school. Even though you are on the same level, it feels like I'm not as good as they are. So it is important for you to understand that usually it is rooted in a fear of failure, that you are feeling you can't celebrate your success because you don't believe that you really are successful. So it's again, it's a mindset that is rooted in the things that we encountered earlier.
And I remember during the self-sabotage event, you
Mhm.
actually mentioned perfectionism as a form of self-sabotaging.
Yes,
All right.
yes.
Is there a particular demographic, age, gender, profession that is more prone to experiencing imposter syndrome?
Yeah, I think people who are in their late 20s into their late 30s, that age group between 28 and 40, those
Hmm.
are the people who will struggle a lot with imposter syndrome, and it will be, and mostly women tend to struggle with that a lot. Now, people who are in the corporate professions, because of this high level of requirement for achievement, they are the ones who struggle a lot, especially I don't know which professions they are, but anything that is in the corporate, where you have to
Hmm.
prove there are what are they called, those analysis, performance analysis that are done every year. And so
Hmm.
there is
Reviews.
quite a bit
The
of
KPI reviews.
yes, yes, yes. Those reviews, that performance reviews and all that, those individuals will, those professions, if you are in a profession where that is happening every year, you are constantly questioning whether, and then when it happens and you pass, then you go like, phew, but then you start again to anticipate for the one
The
for
next
next year.
one.
Yeah.
Mm. It's interesting that you've mentioned that because the next question is how prevalent is imposter syndrome in various professional fields? But I think you've answered that. It's not specific to a field, it's just based on the review cycle, if I've understood you correctly.
Yeah,
Next
yeah.
one.
And yeah.
Okay, go on. Please go on. I cut you short. Go on.
No. I was just going to say that usually imposter syndrome is very personal,
Mm,
because it has the root causes of it has to do with a lot of personal struggle along the way.
mm.
So it can be anywhere, and in any profession, can you can go through that.
Okay, thank you. So, what are some of the underlying causes of imposter syndrome? Are there common experiences or personality traits that contribute to it?
Yeah, I think we listed that in the and people can go back to the recording and look at it. But
Yeah.
mostly family dynamics, like I said, if you were highly celebrated as a child, and your worth was dependent or pegged on your performance, where
Mm,
even maybe sometimes it's your siblings were compared to you. Why can't you be as smart as your brother? That can,
mm,
so both children are going to develop imposter syndrome. Or if you grew up in a space where you are criticized for your failure, so you get 95 and you are told, why didn't you get 100? That can also cause imposter syndrome. And again, things like poverty, things like growing up with hardships in life, and domestic violence. If the environment you grew up in caused you to not feel safe, so there
mm,
isn't much feeling of competent, because you're constantly on survival mode. You don't have time to grow the other
mm,
aspects of you, like now the emotional well-being. That can cause imposter syndrome. As far as personality traits, I believe people who are choleric, people who are really type A, they are driven, they like a project, they like a lot of work, they are going to experience imposter syndrome. But again, if you are a phlegmatic and a sanguine and you just go with the flow, you don't like to assert yourselves too much, you might also develop imposter syndrome, because it really is about how you
Mention.
think about your
Mm.
competence. Yeah.
I'm joining the team that is saying, hey, she's calling us out in capital letters. Cholerics and melancholics. On a light note,
Yeah.
though.
Uh-huh.
uh, how much do external factors like workplace culture or I think you've answered this, or societal
Yes.
expectations play a role? You've
Yes.
answered this. What are some of
Yes.
the common triggers that exacerbate feelings of imposter syndrome? Do you want to take this one, or we've already addressed it?
Yeah, we have addressed it, but let me tell it again. If you are humiliated as a young person in your first 15 or 18 years of life, you are humiliated by a teacher, a pastor, somebody in authority over you, and or
Mm,
even you had a harsh mother or a harsh father. The environment that you grew up tended to make you feel you are not good enough, like the
mm,
standards were too high. What
mm,
will happen is that that can trigger. So now when you are grown, whenever you are called to present something, you are told to do or something, to put together whatever, you might experience a lot of anxiety about being judged or being
mm,
criticized. And that's where I talked about, now in your healing process, you shift from criticism to feedback, because feedback is
mm,
softer and you are able
mm,
to receive it. So you want to kind of look at the people who trigger, the places
mm,
that trigger, and the things that trigger the feelings of imposter syndrome, so that you can understand your triggers, your specific triggers, and then try to see if they are rooted in something, because usually
Please.
there is always a place where it started.
Mhm. Now,
Yeah.
Grace, as you're saying this, a side question just from me, because I'm beginning to think what resources are there to start to dig yourself out of being stuck in an imposter syndrome cycle over and above. Of course, I am always a proponent for go see a therapist, go see Grace if you're struggling
Yeah.
with any of these things. But I'm also wondering, is there a book? I know most of us are in book clubs. We are in very many book clubs. And there
Yeah.
are always discussions of what book should we be reading next. Now, on this
Mm.
topic of imposter syndrome, is there a specific book that you've come across that you would recommend that we read
Mm.
to just work through imposter syndrome?
Actually, I'll be honest and say no.
Okay.
I don't have a book, but
Mm,
please the information we have on Amazon. Just type in there. Go on online. I won't say I haven't read a book myself. I haven't looked for one. What I
Mm,
do is I do a lot of looking at research papers. So
mm.
and most people don't they don't have the stomach to read research
We
papers. So
do.
I
We
want
do. Everybody.
to encourage all of us. Let me give you an empowering thing. Go to go to Amazon or even in Google and just type
Mm,
in imposter syndrome books, and they
mm.
will there are books of them, and you will be able to find that. Unfortunately, myself, I haven't read the imposter syndrome phenomena is quite new. And so if, when I was training, it was not even something I ever had. So it's quite new, but there is a lot of research on it. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Okay, we will go on Amazon, and when we are unable to, we will just call you Grace. And
Yes.
next one
And you know now what I'm gonna do. I'm going to look for the books.
for the books. Yes, and then you'll tell us. Thank you so much. So,
Yes.
can you share some examples of how significant life changes or career transitions might trigger imposter syndrome?
Okay, so significant life breakups are very big on causing people to develop self-doubt. So when we go through a breakup of an important relationship, we enter into self-doubt, because I made a decision. Maybe I'm not as good a decision maker as I thought, because this is a decision I made and now it has gone safe, left. So you will be triggered to begin to think, maybe I'm not as good as I thought. Usually I hear when individuals come who are grieving the loss of a relationship, they will ask me, do you think it was my fault? You see, I begin to question, did I do everything I could have? Was it because of me that they left? Was it because of me that the relationship didn't work? When it comes to career transitions, yes, especially if you have been in one working for one company for a very long time, and then now you have to transition. Even when it is your choice and it's a promotion, it's a better job, you will still go through a transition where you might find yourself going into imposter syndrome until you get used to the or you get acclimated to the new environment, the new culture. So we need to be okay with the transitions of from one space to the next one. And if there needs to be a grief process, we recognize it. If we can't be able to do it by ourselves, let's seek the help that we need. Because what we want to make sure that we don't do is where
Mm,
we stay with a lot of mental struggle, that it becomes chronic, and it changes our way of thinking. So what we want to do is, the moment you recognize that this transition is hard, let me talk to a therapist, because the therapist or even a life coach can help you to process it in your mind, and you can be able to hear another voice that balances what you're going through, what is normal, and what how to now create the tools so that you don't become stagnated in that space of self-doubt, because now the self-doubt is what is going to bring in the imposter syndrome. And then you can learn tools on how to manage your to regulate your emotions that are triggered by the space where you are in.
okay. All right. Next one, Grace. How does imposter syndrome affect an individual's mental health and overall well being?
Okay, so for cholerics, a lot of frustration, anger, and expressing, externalizing their emotions. And cholerics tend to feel more anger. That's why I say not everything is anger. Sometimes it's disappointment, sometimes it is loss, sometimes it
Mm,
is feelings of abandonment. It can be anything, or sometimes it can be a loss of control. So, but then I'm expressing anger. So so what that is what imposter syndrome will cause the choleric to be very sensitive to criticism. So when there is criticism, they lash out. You see, The melancholic will implode. When there is criticism, they will feel depressed. Now, the choleric might express anxiety. The melancholic will be depressed, so they will be sad, and they will constantly have the self doubt that will show up in isolation and lack of joy and lethargy and poor performance because of inability to focus. Now, for the choleric, there will be a lot of impulsivity, kind of doing things without thinking and then regretting. And the choleric, because of pride and impatience, they are not going to say, I'm sorry. So, what they will do is they will mask with a lot of aggression. Now, when it comes to the phlegmatic and the sanguine, they will kind of go into lethargy mostly. So the sanguine will go with the flow. They are flip flopping a lot, so they go with the flow. When you celebrate them, they feel great. When they are not celebrated, they feel bad, or they might put on a mask of happiness all the time when there isn't any. And then you might find the sanguine, if not very careful, the sanguine and the choleric, if they are not very careful, they do the externalizing with partying, spending a lot of money, going for activities, activity after activity after activity, and you can find that now they do self-destructive behaviors like bad sexual relationships, things like alcohol and drugs, and just spending money without really thinking, impulsivity like that. And then with the phlegmatic, what you see is just indifference. It's just indifference. They do the bare minimum. They don't push themselves. So those are mental health issues so the procrastination, for the impulsivity, for the and poor boundaries and people pleasing for the sanguine. The phlegmatic will be more lethargy, no, like what do we call it, procrastination, lack of motivation. They just do just the bare minimum. And then the melancholic, a lot of internal, so they will have a lot of isolation, talking to people, maybe even drinking alone, doing drugs alone. They just kind of get back into themselves. So it can show up in many ways as far as mood disorders are concerned.
Okay. Thank you. Are there any long-term consequences of chronic imposter syndrome if left unaddressed?
Yeah, so you will find people who will get into escapism. So they will, even though they are very, you have seen people who are very successful, but then their behaviors, they are very self-destructive. So you will find individuals who spend money badly, they drink and drive. They are just kind of all out of control. And then eventually what is going to happen is that they externalize their need for their feel good, their worthiness. So you might find that a person is going to constantly feel they are not good enough. They are not happy, basically. And then, of course, as we grow older, we will increase our frustration and our lack of joy, our lack of feeling of goodness. And so what will happen is we become these grouchy, people who you are not happy, you are always fighting with people, you are all over the place, or you just isolate completely. I just go to work and go home. I don't want to talk with people. And then there is no movement. They may not move in terms of growing. So the self-sabotage can happen. And then relationships for them, they don't work because they don't believe in themselves. Because you see, imposter syndrome, I'm a fraud. So even when I'm in a relationship, I don't think that I'm good enough. And so I will create that feeling, that fear of being abandoned will happen because I'm not able to grow in because I just don't believe in myself. in myself.
Okay. I'm going to
Yeah.
ask that we have a hard stop at 7:30 because the questions are there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Wow. Okay. There's quite a bit of them. So Grace, so that nobody feels that their question has been left out and or ignored. If we've
Mm,
already addressed it, we will refer to the section of the presentation and move on. So we'll just
mm,
quick highlight on all of them. What are
yeah.
some behavioral patterns or coping mechanisms that individuals with imposter syndrome might exhibit?
I just
I think
answered
you
that
answered
one.
this. Yes, the
Yeah.
alcoholism, the sexual addictions, and or imploding, isolating,
Yeah.
depression. I
Yes.
think you've answered this. How
Mm-hmm.
does imposter syndrome impact personal and professional relationships?
Yeah, so I have answered a bit of that, but I will say inability to effectively communicate, yeah, and inability to effectively manage conflict. So a lot
Mm,
of arguing, a lot of fights, verbal
mm,
fights especially, because the person is constantly feeling. It's what I talked about: criticism versus feedback. So there is a lot of feelings of attack. I feel attacked, and therefore
mm.
I am constantly defending myself. So I don't even accept, I don't even look at what I'm being told. As long as it's something that I'm being told that I'm thinking I'm being criticized, I constantly am on that fight mode. And
Defense
so,
mode.
yeah.
Okay. What therapeutic approaches or techniques are effective in treating imposter syndrome? The three C's, the last three
Yes.
slides that are presented. So we'll move
Yeah.
on from this one. How do you help clients reframe their thoughts and build self confidence? The three C's with cognitive
Yes.
research. Am I right? Am I right,
Yes.
Grace?
Yes.
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 Okay. Okay. What practical strategies can individuals use to manage or overcome their imposter syndrome in their daily lives? People, place, things, identify where it's coming from, then cognitive
Yes.
restructuring as a solution.
Yes. Yes,
Okay,
absolutely. Journaling, journaling, journaling. Learn how to have conversations with yourself through
with
journaling.
yourself.
All those things
Mm,
that we said, write them out every
mm.
day, especially if you want to overcome it.
You've said that, Grace, and I remember something that you taught me, even when you were saying reframing, it's not always anger, it could be somewhere else. And I think I want
Yeah.
to request that you share with us the link to the Wheel of Emotions so that we
Yes,
can
yes,
also start learning how to identify exactly what is it that I'm feeling. I may think I'm angry, but it may just be simple frustration. So just to identify
yes,
that.
yes,
Can you
yes, yes.
recommend any resources? We have spoken about this. Grace will tell us
Yeah,
about the books
yes.
and the self
Now, there
assessment
is
that
a
can be
site.
used.
There is a
Mm,
site that I want to encourage people. It's called positivepsychology.com.
mm.
So just go there and look. There are some things you can get for free from them, and there are some things you need to purchase, but they have a lot of exercises. And just put in imposter syndrome. You'll be surprised at the things that they will come up with. Yeah, so
I'll look for it.
positivepsychology.com.
Okay, I'll look for it and I'll put it in the chat. Thank you, Grace.
Mm-hmm.
How can mentors, colleagues, and employers support someone who is struggling with imposter syndrome? I can answer this one. If you have medical cover,
Yes,
your medical cover most probably covers a session with a therapist. Go to therapy. That's the
yeah,
brief answer. Go to therapy. It's already covered by your insurance.
right.
Uh, what roles, sorry, let me just post it. What role do peer support groups play in addressing imposter syndrome?
Now,
Okay, over to you.
the
This one.
yeah, the role that peer support groups play is where we share. So when we are in a peer support group, the sharing of similar struggles in itself is very healing. It's empowering because I'm not alone.
Mm,
And then when we are in there, so we are asking each other, by the way, how do you deal with that? When that happens, what do you normally do? And there, that is where now we are able to share with each other. So the shared struggle plus now sharing what works for each one, everybody sharing what works, that really helps. Yeah.
Oh, all right. The last two seem similar to me, so I'll just post them together. How do cultural differences influence the experience and perception of imposter syndrome? And are there societal changes or initiatives that can help reduce the prevalence of imposter syndrome? I think you've spoken about this a little bit when you're speaking about how we relate with our children as parents. But I'll let you just add on to it. And this is our last question because of time.
Yeah, so with cultural differences, remember, we are growing up in a culture where we don't get celebrated because
Mm,
we think there is the saying that we will grow a big head. And so so even people I have worked with individuals, they themselves, they cannot celebrate themselves because they think if I do, I will relax and I will not work harder, you see. But
mm,
what we want to say is that you actually get, you can actually get the both worlds where you celebrate your achievements and continue to work hard at them. So it doesn't have to be
mm.
one or the other. We
Or
can do
the
that. But
other.
our culture tends to frown on self celebration.
Mm,
Our religious leanings, especially our Christian faith, tends to look at self that expression of self love as
mm,
selfishness, and actually it's not. It's the way that
mm,
we interpret it to be. But we are made in the image of God, and when you read the book of Psalms, they always are talking about the goodness of God. You see
yep.
that He's a good God. So we celebrate God. We are made in His image. We need to celebrate ourselves as made in the image of God. And so when I do
Mm,
something good, I don't have to go and tell everybody about it to show that I'm celebrating myself. That is grandiosity and it's not
mm,
helpful. What I want, and neither do I want to go and do oh no, no, don't I can't celebrate myself because it's no, we don't want to do that. We want to get into the balance where we have what we call healthy narcissism. And narcissism is
Oh, that's new.
selfishness. I so the healthy narcissism is me being able to celebrate myself, but within a healthy space. I don't use it
Oh,
as a way to
mm,
be grandiose or to make other people feel like they are small. So it's not a
mm,
power thing. So we in our cultural space,
mm,
the reducing of the imposter syndrome would need to be a way. And again, the shifting of what it means to celebrate or to celebrate our success. We don't go too high, neither do we go too low. We find
too
a
low.
balance. Yeah, and
Good
be able to
balance.
see it is what it is, and this is the
Mm,
truth. The truth is that, Grace, you have done great for yourself, and we celebrate that within a healthy space.
mm. Okay, thank you. Thank you so much, Grace, for sharing that and for giving us 31 extra minutes of your time. I'm very, very grateful. On behalf of the space community, Asante Sana, thank you very, very much. To the safe space community, those of us who are viewing now and those of us who will catch the recording later and rewatch later, please do reach out to Grace Karaoke on her website, Haba Counseling, and book a session with her. She's as delightful as you see her here. It's not for show. She's actually the same person, even during one-on-one sessions. So do go on and speak to her. Just book a session. If you're experiencing any of the things she's spoken about in the recent past, self-sabotage, imposter syndrome, stress management, change management, reach out to her, talk to her, and then let your journey into taking care of yourself, your wellness, your well-being, your mental health begin. Thank you so much, everyone. That said, Grace, let's say bye and
Bye
everybody have a good
bye.
evening. Bye, everyone.
Yes.
See you next week. See you next week on Wednesday. Thank you, everyone.